Thanks for joining us tonight. We're still in Genesis 15. And again, I reiterate, I believe that this is the most important chapter in the book of Genesis. We are talking about establishing a covenant relationship between God and between Abraham, which was representing all of mankind. And you know, Abraham had been promised that his seed, out of him would come nations, would come kings, and that his seed would be as the sand of the sea and the stars of the sky. But here Abraham is an old man. He's in the 70s, perhaps around 75. His wife is 65. They're past the age of having children. And God has promised him that it's not Lot, his nephew, going to be his heir, but it's going to be children, a child from his own seed and Sarah's seed that is going to come together to basically be the seed for nations and the whole nation of Israel ultimately, which ultimately caused a grafting in of the Gentiles through Jesus Christ when we accept him as Lord and Savior. And what I'm going to talk about tonight is some background information that you need to know concerning what a covenant is. Now, a covenant is basically a relationship between two parties, the bringing together of two parties into one, to where they come into an agreement. And the way they do this with a blood covenant is they take an animal, an innocent, sinless animal, and they open it up, its entire abdomen and thorax, and they flay it open and lay the two halves aside. And then together, with the agreement, they walk through the blood of that innocent animal, and by them being in that blood, it brings the two parties into one. The innocent sacrifice was one that became two halves, and as the covenant parties walk through, the two become one. And it's an everlasting covenant, an ever-binding covenant. And if either party breaks the covenant, they have to die. It is that serious of an agreement. You can't get out of an eternal blood covenant. But during this blood covenant, like we said last night, there's a stronger party and there's a weaker party. And the weaker party has to do the will of the stronger party, but the stronger party has to enable the weaker party to do that will. So here we have God, obviously, the stronger party, and man. And when a covenant comes together, there is an exchange of things between two parties that took place in a Middle Eastern blood covenant. First of all, that they would exchange rings with them. So Abraham would basically give his authority to the Lord. The Lord would give his authority to Abraham. And when two men come together, they exchange rings, which represents their authority. And whatever the authority one has, the other can act on that authority. If my wife wants to write a check out of our checking account, she goes with my authority to do that. If I send her to do something, she goes in my authority to do that. In the same way as when I go in her authority. So can you imagine going with the authority of God? In my name shall you cast out demons. In my name shall you heal the sick. In my name shall you establish great works. So there's an authority that comes with a covenant relationship that God has given us through the blood of the innocent, sinless sacrifice, which ultimately is Jesus Christ. There is also an exchange of belts, which has the money pouch and the sword. The money pouch represents the power, the money. And when money pouches are exchanged, then I have all the resources and all the things that I need from the stronger party, and the stronger party has all my resources. That's why He will go and make provision for what He has willed for us to do. It's a covenant relationship. And so now you're understanding how God operates. The last thing is the exchange of the weapons, so that when the Lord goes to battle, or when another man of that covenant goes to battle, he will fight for him. When we're in covenant relationship with God, who is going to fight our battles? Who is going to join us? Who has got our backside? Who is going to march in front of us? Nothing, no one else other than the Lord. And that's the power of a covenant relationship. Now, tomorrow night we're going to place Abraham into this picture. And there's also a little interlude where Abraham has a dream, and we'll talk about that. So we'll talk more about this tomorrow.